Hey, welcome to Smoker Broker. I'm Robert Meche, and I am the guy they call the Smoker Broker. I hope everything's going well. Happy Thursday, happy summer, happy heat, happy whatever. We are in the summer now. We're back in. Although you wouldn't know it in Dallas last night. I think it was probably 66 degrees this morning. It's really awkward for this time of year in the Big D. But we are in the summer. No more rain. Sun's out all the time, so that's good. COVID's out there. Everything's out there. Just moving along like we always do, using our day-to-day stuff. We are live without limits on KBGI Media, coast to coast. A lot of concentration in the state of Texas area, but we do go across the country for people who do like to tune in and listen. We have a lot of people that follow and watch the show, not so much live, but as on archive. We have a lot of comments that come in through the week about the show, about what they learned. And always feel free to drop us a line if you want to know or you want us to discuss a particular topic. I always look at those. I get a lot of them, and I have to kind of organize what topics I want done. But if you ever want something specific, just go ahead and drop something in, and we'll certainly try to talk about it. We are going to be talking about comparable properties today, basically the market comps. A lot of people always ask questions about that. It's probably one of the most difficult things that we do in real estate is comping the house. We do this show probably once every 6 months, and this is one that a lot of the new agents really enjoy because it is difficult. 20 years into this, I still have to hesitate sometimes when I go in to do a comp. So we're going to really help you guys out with that today. As always, I'm joined by my crew. I've got David Tung and Brent Holdburg out here helping me today. I don't like doing the show by myself. And like I said, they usually do a better job of explaining the information anyways. Well, at least Brent does, So we'll have those guys helping us out as we go through and make these discussions. Comparable property, doing the comps is just, there's so much subjectivity. And the subjectivity is a difficult conversation because it means it's not just, ironclad. It's not just this is exactly what we're talking about. So it can be very difficult. It's not the same all the time. And we're going to go through a lot of the scenarios today that will help you with that. Brent, David, how are things going? So a couple introductions, just more specifically, not just Brent and David. David Tung up here. He is in our North Texas area in the McKinney Plano side, but he'll go just about anywhere to do real estate. He doesn't look like it, but he actually is a very good real estate agent, extremely competent, very smart, helps a lot of our crew out, very respected inside the firm. People are very fortunate to have him as their real estate agent when he has those clients. David, good to see you, buddy. Thanks for coming on.
Same here. Good to have me.
Brent,
me. Good to be here.
Brent's on the show quite a bit as well, and he is our director of operations in the SWR group. He and David both contribute quite a bit to the knowledge that our group has. Obviously, they're a regular co-host on the show, but they also do a lot of behind-the-scenes work for SWR, and they are what keep it running. Brent is also in the McKinney area, and he pretty much would go just about anywhere to sell homes, but his friends are also to have him. He's not only a very competent manager, but he's also very good on the real estate side, and his clients are very fortunate to have him helping them as well. So Brent, always good to have you here as well. I'm going to today let you guys drive the conversation. Of course, I'm going to be on and give my input, but I'd rather you guys drive the conversation because this is one that both of you know very well. And y'all know the ups and downs with it. So let's go ahead and get started with talking about the process in general. You guys set the stage for when we're doing a comp from the list side, from the buy side, how we get into this, when we do it, and let's start talking from there.
David, do you want to run it?
I was waiting for you.
Do that to him. He's not going to do that.
Okay, I'll go first.
No, sure.
Oh, go ahead, David.
Oh no, go ahead. You did before age.
So there's two real times when we have to comp, right? And one obviously is when we're about to do a listing presentation. We want to have a good idea of what that house is going to be worth before we walk into the house itself. So we'll get into how we do it, but when we do our comps, we try to get a ballpark. We try to get a low end and a high end of what we think it could be worth before we step foot in there if we don't see pictures of it previously listed. And then you want to talk about the buy side, Dave?
Well, I was going to add to yours is, just when we do the comp before, like you said, before walking the house, we'll get some idea. And then we'll also look at what other properties that's near, closest nearby that's comparable to the property. And we'll want to make sure what they have. So when we visually, physically sees the subject property, we have a much better idea right up front versus seeing the property, go back out and look at other listings that's, current and prior, which will also help a lot because a lot of, so for example, for seller side, a lot of the time when you walk into a seller appointment trying to, evaluate the house, the seller always going to say, my house worth a lot more, right? And we do want to provide some evidence that, hey, we don't want to be like, hey, no, it's not true, but we want to provide evidence up front, just in case they insist on the pricing.
I would like to tell people this, and I've told it many times on the show, but one of the most interesting things I've found, and all the years I've been doing this, I have never, ever had a seller, ever, not one time, where I told them what their house is worth, and they go, that's exactly what I was thinking. I was on the exact same page. Ever.
Yep.
Ever. Right. It's worth more. Always. And I've never had anybody go, oh, it's much lower than that. Never.
Right.
So it's interesting how the public perceives what the value of their home is. There's a little bit of personal, there's a little bit of pride. Sometimes there can be some selfishness. Sometimes there can be some ignorance. That's what we're here for, is to say, look, you got to remove yourself from this. These are the facts of this house. So, it's very difficult to make someone understand real estate that doesn't do it every day. And this is a common problem we have. The general public is very tough when it comes to not knowing the process that we go through. They have these assumptions that they make, and, they start going through them. We have people that tell us, if we tell them their house is worth $300,000, they're like, well, I go, Tom and Jane sold their house for, $500. Mm-hmm. I'm like, who the hell is Tom and Jane? They go, our next door neighbor. I'm like, the house that's 2,000 square feet bigger than yours? You can't.
Two extra car garage and really nice backyard kitchens.
We're not even the same galaxy. How would you even think? Y'all, so for people out there that are watching, especially those of you who send our show to a client to help them out, 200 square feet is a big deal. Most bedrooms, especially kids' rooms, are like 10 by 10, 12 by 12. You're already talking about 100 square feet there. If you start talking 200 or 300 square feet, you're talking about 2 to 3 rooms, or maybe even an entire another level. When you start talking about 1,000 or 2,000 square feet, good Lord. I mean, you're talking about a compound compared to your house.
And some extra room might cost $15,000 to $20,000 per room, and that's a huge price gap right there.
Yeah, these guys are going to talk to you about outside of 200 square feet. We start really having doubts as to how accurate we are. So when you tell us that you're much better than your neighbor's house, which y'all all say, which is a real big insult to your neighbor. If you ever have a neighbor, they think their house is better than yours, always.
Right.
I've never heard the neighbor go, oh, their house is so much nicer than ours. Never. Their house are like, oh, ours is much better than theirs. So, you have to understand, you cannot just respond to what you see. There's a systematic way that we actually come to that value, and these guys are going to talk about that as we go through. All right, keep going with that.
Okay, so we have a lot to talk about. Mostly we'll do it on the listing side, but on the buy side,
and that's good. We should.
Yeah, that's the other time that you're going to do a lot of comps is on the buy side. I've changed how I've done it over the years. I used to be, Mr. Good agent, and I would sit there and I would comp every single house on our listing tour, or on our showing tour. I would know every house before I'd start. And then I realized what a stupid waste of time that is, especially when you spent like 20 minutes per house and they go, I don't want to see it. And they just keep driving.
Right.
So that's something that you can avoid making that mistake.
Right. See it, like it, and then you comp it.
Yeah, I tell all my clients now, they go, oh, what do you think we should offer? I say, look, I don't even bother comping these until you decide that you really want to put an offer in, and then I'll go comp it. And there's a good chance it's overpriced. So just don't get your hopes up, because we found that if a listing is really overpriced, then that means there's something kind of off right there, and the seller is not going to be reasonable. That's just
Well,
something
I think the most frustrating thing about someone who's overpriced their house is, it's very unfair to the general public out there, because you make someone fall in love with the house, and then when they talk to their expert, their real estate agent, and they're like, this person's out of their mind. And then we try to explain to them that if they're listed at 400,000, but they're overpriced by 75, there's no offer that we're going to give them that's going to make them feel good about what they're doing. So it's really unfair, because now we have to tell the buyer, hey, look, I can try, but they're not going to do it. And now where they're at, they basically made you fall in love with the house, and we can't do it because they're so overpriced. We're not anywhere close to where this should be.
Right. Yeah. So let's go on to when we talk about on the listing side, right? We're going to do a listing presentation. We're going to pull comps, and let's start with talking about the easy comps, right? Which are very rare, very, very rare. Right. But on the off occasion that we happen to get an easy comp, like David, what would you say would be something that would be ideal to comp?
Literally, similar house in the same neighborhood, 2 or 3 of them sold within the last 3 to 6 months, right? Yep. That's a super easy comp.
Even within like 1 or 2 months is like perfect, because you can't argue.
Right. But when you are in a new subdivision that builders are still building additional houses nearby or a couple blocks away, that's within like half-mile radius, that's when you go, oh, crap. Then you start calling out the agents to verify information.
We'll get to that too. And I mean, okay, so then we want to go to our next level of difficulty. Let's say it's the same neighborhood that you talked about, but the subject home, the one you're going to list, has a pool, but nothing else in the area has a pool, right? So now it's getting a little bit more difficult, right? And we've been taught ever since we have been on board with Robert that we usually can add about 40,000 for a pool is what we usually like to give. I'm seeing them now in my area give about 50. That's what the appraiser is giving. But that's been about 10 years since.
And when the pool values have gone up, pool values have gone up. They used to be where a run-of-the-mill pool was, 35 to 45,000. The run-of-the-mill pool these days is probably closer to 45 to 60,000.
I need your pool guy because I got quoted for 75,000 starting.
Well, so it's funny. My brother Michael, he's looking right now, and I was like, wow. I go, that's like really high. Mm-hmm. I always thought we had a nice pool that we built, and I thought we spent a lot of money on it. And that's been a while, but those quotes today, I'm like, good.
I mean, yours is a grotto.
So, what's that?
Yours has a grotto. It's like the Playboy Mansion at your place.
But that's actually a good transition to what I want to talk about. So it's funny because I wanted to discuss the pool, because the pool is an interesting part about the comp. So, we talked about takeaways from the show. So this is a good takeaway for our show today about comps. So a lot of people believe that a pool, you hear this old myth that when you build a pool that as soon as you start digging the hole, you're burying your money. A lot of people think when you build a pool that it's a waste of money. That's what the general public thinks. And as always, the general public is typically wrong when it comes to real estate.
Yep. There
are some exceptions to this rule, okay? Yeah. If the pool was built prior to the 1990s where they weren't using gunite and they were using cement and there's a lot of cracks and there's a lot of problems and it's a 1980s house and the pool actually looks like a detriment, or the pool looks like a detriment to the house, then it does. It is a waste of money at that point. But anybody who's built a pool in the last 20 years and the house is like, let's say that 200,000 and it's a pool that's been built within the last 20 years, rest assured that pool is going to add about, Brent said 40. I used to say 30, but now
I say about 20.
I'm probably at the 40 to 60 range. It will add value.
Yeah.
Did you say 20, David?
I say about 20, 20 to 30.
Somewhere in there. Yeah, it should go more. Now, there's some areas you might be right. Now, now you make a good comment about an appraiser might tell you that it's only worth 15 or 20, which is a weird thing. Yeah. But as far as market value goes, if it's in the last 20 years, it's going to carry 30 to 50,000 more.
50 here.
Yeah. So that's a myth. That's a myth that people say, oh, well, that's a waste of money. I'm like, no, it's not.
No, that's what I tell all the neighbors too around here, or anybody that's thinking about it. I said, hey, if you're going to spend around 40 to 50, you probably will get dollar for dollar back on that later. But anything over that, that's what you need to be prepared to lose. And if you want it for your own enjoyment, that's fine. But don't spend 150 and expect to get that all out.
So, all right, so that's where I wanted to go with this. I wanted to talk about the basis, but here's where the myth is true. So the moment you cross that threshold of 50 or 60,000 on the pool, now I will tell you, you're probably not going to get it back. And this is where when Brent was joking, which is why I did not put one in. When you start putting the grotto, the laser show, and the lights, and the dolphin that spits water at you or whatever when you pass,
smoker into the pool.
Yeah,
the improve bar.
You're starting to talk about that is not, you're not going to get that return. So if you put a 100K pool in, you're probably not going to get the 30 or 40K out of it if you turned around and sold it, within the next 5 years or so. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, what's weird about this conversation is when you go up into higher dollar houses, that reverts back. So if you get into a house that's like $1 million and they have a $300,000 pool, then it actually might add value to the house because of the uniqueness of the pool, which again is why this is such a great show topic, because this is confusing. I mean, we're telling you sometimes they're right. It doesn't mean a damn thing. Sometimes it absolutely adds value. Sometimes it adds sick value, but you have to know where you're at in the process and the type of house you're dealing with to make that decision. So that's a good takeaway from the show today. When it comes to the pool comps, where does the pool come in? And the real frustrating part about this conversation is that what we just told you is true. But when an appraiser values the house, they don't do it like that. They come up with these weird, sometimes they're like, oh, it's 20K. I'm like, how can you say it's 20,000 when they just put it in?
That's why I stick with the 20K, because that's what general appraiser like. Hey, it's about 20K to 30K.
You are right. That is true. But from a market standpoint, most of the people are willing to, and the appraiser finds some way to make those houses make the value most of the time. But on the appraisal, they do sometimes say, well, it's only worth 20. I'm like, how can you say that? Yeah. They have a receipt that says they put $75,000 in last year. Where would you think in your head that it's gone to 20? So that becomes a little frustrating thing as well. All right.
Right. So, I mean, I would say that comping is really, it's an art form, right? And that's where we make our money, because there's not just a set formula that you can plug into a computer. Like, I know appraisers use that value, right? Like a half bath, they say, oh, that's worth 5,000.
Yeah, how the hell that number ever came up, I don't know.
And like you said before, okay, this has hand scrape. Well, how do they know how much the hand scrape costs? It's like, it's so subjective, and they don't use the data that we have. They just don't. So that's why, experienced agents and ones that have been trained well will know, hey, this is a pretty good place to price this house. When we talked about overpriced listings, which is a thing we get a lot, people they think the house is worth more, lead them down this trail, this path where we show them the data. This house is similar, this house is similar. And we're hoping along this journey that we can make them come to the conclusion that they need to drop the price of what's in their mind.
Data is everything. Data is everything. It tells them, we're not making this up. Data is everything. We're point blank telling you this is exactly like your house. There's this one, there's this one, there's 3 or 4 houses just like yours that have sold at this amount. What makes you think that you're not in that range?
Sometimes they don't care. And I've had it before, and I'm sure you guys have too, where you get somebody and they say, I understand that it's not going to make, or it's overpriced, but I want to try. That's the number one thing. And then we hit them with, I'm going to make appraisal, and we use that as another way to try to back them down. But we've even gotten them to where they say, well, we're just going to get a cash buyer. And you say, cash buyers don't overpay. They just don't.
Yeah. They're the worst.
Yeah.
They're the worst. They're not going to overpay.
Cash buyers are the hardest.
Much different.
Right.
They're the worst. As far as negotiating goes. Not
all right.
I love cash buyers.
So David, how do you start comping a house? Let's just use an example of a 4-bedroom, 2-bath house, 2,500 square feet, McKinney, whatever.
I email Robert and you, and just making sure that those numbers match with mine. That's all it is.
Right.
It's a good idea.
Well, I mean, that's the whole thing. I always assume that, I may miss certain properties. So I always double check with few agents just to make sure, my number are in line with everybody else sees.
Hey, let me answer a question. Jay, it's good to see you. Jay asked, how do you tackle the "my house is better" attitude? The answer is very carefully. We don't want to just point blank tell someone you're an idiot, okay? Because that's not the business that we're in. We're not in the business of telling someone you're stupid or that's ridiculous or how did you come up with that? So we're very careful when we come across and we tell someone about their house. Now, we talked about the data. We talked about using the data. One thing I felt I've done very good over the years is I can take someone who has a very high opinion of their house and pop it and get them down to where they're seeing it the same way I do. And you have to be very tactful. You have to be very careful. But you look at the data and you keep repeating to them, this is what they're going to be looking at. Now, the real answer to your question is when I get someone who is being very stubborn, I'm like, all right, I'm going to take you out today and we're going to go look at houses at that dollar amount. And you and I are going to look at each other and you're going to tell me whether you think that your house is in the same category. Now that over the years has been very hard to overcome for the person who said that. If that person really thought that, I mean, there are some people that just, no matter what you say, they're going to keep saying that. But then you can really start giving them the weird look going, you were at the same house I was today. Where do you think that Italian granite cut is the same as what you have in this kitchen? Where do you think that your laminate hardwood compared to this hand scraped hardwood that was 3 inches thick is the same? You're not even in the same ballpark. So we have to prove it to them. The answer to your question is we have to prove it. We have to prove it to them when they say my house is better. We have to prove it to them with data and visual that it is not better. It's a format. It's a format that we go through and a formula that we go through that says this house is worth this amount.
Well, there's two things that I, have my two opinions. One, I like to bring my computer when I do a listing presentation. So I don't just show them the PDF of the comp that we're using. I want to show them pictures of the inside and be like, okay, this one isn't, this one doesn't match up to yours. This one sucks. This one's a little bit better, blah, blah, blah. But I noticed the biggest issue you have when people want to overprice their home is that they've spent money on renovations and they want that money back. And it's a huge shock to them when they spent $100,000 on that kitchen that they're not getting that much back on it.
Yeah, so let's talk about that too. This is a good takeaway from the show as well. House renovations. You have to be very careful about upgrading your house because you think you're adding value to it. Make no mistake about it. Your upgrades will rarely significantly change the value of your house, outside the exception of a pool, which is a little bit different. The stuff that you do inside the house is still the same square footage. We rely heavily on the square feet and the location of the home. Nothing is going to change our opinion that if those houses are similar square feet, they're in similar areas, we're going to give it a certain value. If there's $50,000 or $100,000 worth of upgrades, that's really not going to change my opinion of the value. Now, what will it do? What's the good thing about someone who's upgraded their house? Brent, David, what's the good part?
A lot easier to sell.
It sells faster.
Yeah.
It sells faster. That's a fact. But to sit there and say it's going to add value, one of my favorite conversations, and I do this a lot when I have any type of instruction or I have any people in front of me. I love it when somebody, like, let's say they have a home in Plano from the houses that were built in the 1970s. Those of you who watch us statewide or throughout the country, Plano is a massive suburb north of Dallas. It started like literally in 1970. Someone said, let's just put 10,000 houses out here, all 1,500 square feet, all one-story ranch, and we'll call it Plano. That's pretty much what happened. So let's say it's a very popular area, still to this day very popular, and you have someone who you'll go to do a listing and the house still has everything in it since 1975. They have not redone the kitchen. I still am shocked when I see this. They have not redone the kitchen. They haven't redone the walls, the carpet, nothing. And this person says, you know what, we need to do some upgrades before we put the house on the market. We're like, you do. So they upgrade, they put their hardwood in, they put their granite in, and they spend like $60,000. And then when we tell them what their house is worth, they're like, oh, wait a minute. That's what this guy's house is worth. We just put $60,000. And I'm like, yeah. And congratulations for bringing your house up to date from 1975 to 2020. I mean, what do you want? A medal for finally getting? You did what you were supposed to have done already. This wasn't an add-on. This was you're not getting anywhere close to this unless you put the upgrades that need to be into this house. So it's funny how people perceive what putting money into their house is. That money rarely is going to come out as extra. It's just going to get it to where it's sold with the market. Another mistake you can make while we're on the same topic is, let's say you decide you're going to put some hardwood into the house. If you put the most expensive hardwood in there, you've just outpriced what you were going to do. If you put $50,000 worth of hardwood down on the ground, someone could have come and said, well, I would have put $20,000 in. I'm damn well not paying you an extra $30,000 because you were an idiot. Just because you're stupid doesn't mean I am. So you have to be careful when you start looking at it. And honestly, when you list a house, when you start talking about putting your house for sale and you're going to start doing major upgrades, let me give you a good takeaway from this show. And this is a good advertising for a lot of y'all out there as well. You need to talk to us before you start screwing around with your house for sale. You'd be surprised what we tell you not to do. There are a lot of people that think that I'll come into a house and tell them to do all these things. I'm actually the opposite. I'm going to tell them to do very little. I want the house to be clean. I want it to be clean and presentable. If the carpet needs to be redone, if the wood needs to be redone, I'm going to address it, but probably not telling them to do it now. I'll probably work it into whether we do it as an allowance so somebody can pick out what they want to do, but I'm not going to do the one.
Foundation, the roof, make sure your foundation is.
We've got a lot of questions over here. Let me answer a few of them, and then we'll get you guys back on track. David said open houses, no offers. Still think, yeah. David's basically saying, I'm doing all this stuff here, but it's not selling. So at what point, is the price right? 60 days plus on market and seller's market, no offers. Yeah. So, and especially, well, actually all across the country right now, if your house is on the market 60 days, the price is not right. It is not right. And the only other exception to that is if it's just weird. You've done something weird to it, or it backs up to some massive commercial or something that's deterring from. But other than that, if it's 60 days in this market right now, you are overpriced. This is not a magic world. We are not magicians. We are telling you right now, there's a reason why that's sitting. Hey, Laura, it's good to see you. Going back to the pool topic, can you put a house on the market over what the appraiser values it? I'm very new to the game. Okay, so look, it depends how you're asking that question. If you're saying that you went and got an appraiser before you listed the house, and now you want to list the house, but you want to list it higher than the appraiser, my response to that assumption, appraisers appraise the house value differently when they're doing it independently versus when they're doing it for a bank loan. Any appraiser that watches this show will immediately put on here, that's not true, we do it the same, and that's BS. They don't. I've done it for way too long. I have way too many appraiser friends. They have point blank told me off the record that they are a lot more liberal when they do an appraisal for a refi or just in general versus someone who's purchasing a house. I don't care. We can argue all day about it. You can come on the show. I know way too many appraisers that will tell you that. So it's very difficult when you have an appraiser come out to before you actually list the house. And Laura, I realize this isn't probably the way you were asking that question, but I'm going to answer it this way and get to answering the question that you have. Now, another thing I like about that comment, it spears we have a lot of people that say, well, I'm going to get an appraisal before I go to list the house because I want to make sure it's right. That doesn't do a damn thing. That, in fact, it could actually hurt. It could hurt you because now you're saying, well, my house is worth this. I'm like, no, it's not. That is not what we're looking at right now. So I'm not a big fan of getting the house appraised before you go on the market because it's just really not going to give an accurate value as to what the market is going to perceive. So when we start talking about, can you put it way over? I'm not really concerned about what the appraiser said on a generic appraiser. I'm concerned with what the comp said. If the comps told me the house is worth this amount, then that's fine. Now, a backtrack to your question is what if the appraiser who, let's say we do get the house under contract and the appraiser who comes in, it's working for the lender or the buyer's lender, says, I'm not giving that amount of value, then we've got a problem. Then we've got an issue. We have to have a discussion as to why is it that we're off on the value itself. Now, Andre's way. Andre, it's good to see you, buddy. I know you're always busy. It's good to have you watch the show live every once in a while.
Andre.
Archive all the time. Yes, when it comes to about upgrades, so many people make this mistake. When we start talking about takeaways and what I'm going to do to the house, you would be very surprised what we tell you to do to your house when we get in there. We are not going to tell you to do massive renovations when we're about to put this thing on the market. Now, if we're telling you that you have to do it to get up to code to the market, meaning so far beyond, that's another conversation. But we will never tell you to start putting upgrades and stuff into the house to get more for it.
Well, our job is to put the most money into our sellers' pockets as possible. Yeah. So for them to spend too much on our advice on upgrades, it's going to cost them more money. So we want to have them spend as little as possible so they can sell it for as high a dollar as possible.
So I'll give you another takeaway too. Carpet. We have a lot of people that their carpet just looks like crap. Anybody who has kids or dogs, their carpet's crap after 6 months anyway. So, which I would say something really embarrassing about our personal situation with carpet in the house, but I'm not going to do it because Dino would get mad at me. It really is funny that I would say that with what I've got in my house right now. So if you're going to put the house on the market and the carpet looks like crap, a lot of people always ask, well, we need to replace the carpet. I'm like, you do, but it's a matter of when we replace it. This is a constant battle with all real estate agents. There are some brokers that'll tell you that you have got to replace it before you put this on the market because it just looks terrible. I've always been of the opinion that, well, we all agree it looks terrible. Let's not run from this, but why should we go and move all the shit out, replace it, which is a pain in the ass with carpet, is removing everything out and then putting it back in, paying someone to do all that, when someone who's going to buy the house might not even like the house.
Oh, they're going to rip it out, I guarantee it.
And look, that's a good point too. Y'all have no idea, not you guys, but people who are somewhat watching this, you have no idea how many times I've had someone replace flooring and then we pass by a week later and it's out on the street. We had someone one time, this is a fact. We had someone one time put a really nice laminate wood on the ground. I want to say he spent $13,000. They did it 2 weeks before the house went on the market. The person stripped it all out and threw it. I was like, oh my God, that is the biggest colossal waste of money I've ever seen in my entire life. So, what's that?
I'd say get the carpet steam cleaned before you go. That's always
absolutely. But
Deodorized, steam cleaned.
Don't run from it. Acknowledge the carpet is bad. We know it needs to be replaced. Put like some type of we teach our guys to put a nice flyer brochure holder that says, hey, we are well aware the carpet needs to be replaced. But rather than us put something you don't like or some cheap industrial carpet in there, we are willing to give an allowance with a reasonable offer if you so choose. And I like that wording because I didn't say I was going to give $10,000 worth of carpet. I didn't say that. What I said was I will give some type of an allowance if we have a reasonable offer on this house. I'm not going to subject myself to saying 10,000 or $3,000. And most carpet for most houses, it probably costs anywhere from $2,500 to $4,000 to recarpet a normal house. I'm not going to sit there and tell someone to give them $5,000 or $10,000. It might only need $1,500 worth of replacing. But to sit there and replace it, I'm not the biggest fan. Now, a lot of people differ with me on this. It's my show. It's an opinion,
Well, I
always talk about what's fact and what's not. This is an opinion, but I believe over the years I've saved our clients a lot more money, and it didn't put their house in danger not selling because of the way the flooring looked. Now, if it's so bad to where you have to hold your nose when you walk in, that's different, all right? But if it's just because of a little bit of tracking and dirty, I'm not so much about redoing the whole thing. If the house is vacant, maybe. If it's vacant, I'm going to do it. But you
also factor that into your offer if it needs to be.
Yeah.
You factor the carpet replacement cost into your offer anyways.
Yeah. You'd be surprised how many people replace the flooring when they move in.
Yeah.
if I'm buying a pre-existing house right now, I'm changing the flooring. I think that's kind of weird to walk on somebody else's flooring. It's been, God knows what they've done on that over the years. I'm just creeped out by that. That's so funny. And I love the show for myself sometimes because it makes me think of things. Another thing I find really interesting is how many people buy a house and they don't change the locks. That's like really weird to me. I mean,
a lot.
Damn keys are out there for that particular house. I'm shocked at how many people tell me that they never rekeyed their house. Now our clients, we tell them to do it, or at least you are supposed to if you're following checklists correctly. But it's amazing to me how many don't do it. I'm just like, that's a pretty weird thing to do. There's people who still have access.
Yeah, like the crazy ex-girlfriend or the ex-wife.
Yeah, I mean,
barging in the house. Like, who are you?
But this world's crazy, I mean, it is. So I'm not letting anybody have, random keys. I'm changing that from the moment on.
So let's go back to when we're selling. We talked about if there's homes that are all similar in a subdivision, if it's all in the same decade, that's very easy to comp. Some of the harder things to comp are if it's the largest house in the neighborhood by far. That's a very difficult one. Another difficult one is when you are comping pre-existing homes in an area where the builders are still building. That one's a bear.
Yeah. Horrible.
So we'll talk about takeaways from that too. And this isn't the most pleasant one, but actually, just to show you how valid the show is, I had this conversation right before I came on air. It is very difficult for us to sell a home in a new construction subdivision that's still building. If they're still building,
good luck.
Y'all, it is very difficult for you to go up against a house that's brand new with warranties on it and you've lived in yours.
Yeah.
You're going to be priced out. And a lot of builders start higher and then they start lowering a little bit to get the rest of the subdivision sold.
Right.
So you might have bought in the first part and you might be higher. And then you turn around and sell it 2 years. And now the same house you bought is $40,000 less with incentives.
We're going to have to wait 5 years. 5 years. Yeah.
I typically have a very, I don't sound like it, but I do have a personal, very optimistic view of real estate. That is the most negative piece of real estate is when we have to go sell that. And I don't sugarcoat it anymore. When I talk to a client, I'm like, that's going to be tough.
Yeah.
And I want you to realize that right now I can go over to that office and buy 3 houses that are bigger than yours, nicer than yours, newer than yours, with warranties, and you're 20,000 higher. I mean, only an act of God is going to get that house sold unless you start plating these walls with gold. It's going to be really difficult. So that's a very tough situation to be in. Okay.
Do you guys come across it a lot? I mean, this is a loaded question. Do you come across it a lot where listing agents will, when they figure out the price, they just go price per square foot, regardless of size? So if one's 2,500 and 3,000, and they go, oh, well, this one is 130 a square foot at 2,500, so it should be the exact same at 3,000. You guys come across?
I've seen those.
I've learned on the show it's good sometimes to let you guys run it because you guys bring up really a lot of points that I forget to bring up, and they're valid. So, Brent, be a little more clear with what you were talking about there when you were saying.
Right. Well, I mean, just in general, we've always known it's a good rule of thumb that the smaller the home.
Oh yeah, okay. I couldn't remember. I lost my train of thought. The dollar per square foot. So we get that a lot. So here's a good takeaway, especially for a lot of our new agents that watch inside of Keller and all the other brokerages that watch too. We got a few that are from other brokerages that are watching right now.
Come on over.
Yeah, come on over. And by the way, too, we don't talk about that much on the show, but y'all, let me tell you, the group that we have in place, you are always welcome. We're always bringing on more agents. We focus on not only full-time, but especially part-time agents. You ever want to catch up with us, our info typically is coming across the bottom.
Oh, don't forget our sponsor.
Very good place for y'all to hang your real estate license. All right, so a lot of people are taught when they're comping a house, they go by the dollar per square foot, and they're religious to the dollar per square foot. It's a lousy way to comp a house. All right. Not so much we have to look at the dollar per square foot, but it's the way you look at it. Now, I'll tell you something that really infuriates me when it comes to comping a house are the ways the boards, the MLS systems, the Netris system that we look at, how they have automated processes that let you do a CMA,
Yes.
and they comp a house. That thing, I look at that and go, how the hell did that number get on here?
Yeah.
That thing it has a program. It's kind of like a bigger company that I won't mention that just gives you this random value. It looks at this little circle and says, well, this one sold here and this one. They're like 4 or 5 different neighborhoods that completely different.
Some of them a mile away. I'm like,
I think those automated CMA things are like dice rollers in Vegas. I think they're like, bam, oh, it's that one today. You cannot value a home off specific dollar per square feet. If you're off by 200 or 300 square feet, that dollar per square foot is significantly different. For instance, I love it when a big home, like Brent was talking about, which is what brought this conversation up, when the largest home in the neighborhood says, well, these guys sold at 150 a square foot. I'm like, they're 2,000 square feet smaller than you.
You're at 120.
Why that dollar per square foot to yours? That would make it look like you're worth $5 million.
Yeah.
Like, you'd be lucky if you get half between what they have and you have. That alone is a reason why you can't just say dollar per square foot. Y'all, comping, this is the biggest takeaway from this show. I'm going to tell you right now, what I've learned over the past 20 years, when it comes to comping, and this is why it's so damn difficult because so many people don't have enough of it, you have to use common sense. You have to say to yourself, if I'm comping this house right now with the same person who was looking at these houses or who bought these houses at these prices, would they have looked at this house and would they have bought it? That is the only way you're ever going to get an accurate comp. You have to common sense to yourself, say, would the same person have bought this house?
Right. Well, I just went under contract on a property. I went and saw 3 in a neighborhood. And actually, I'm about to go in a few minutes and go meet our sponsor, Mr. Martin Cooley.
Nice. Yes, very good.
But
let me give his spiel here in a second, right after you're done with this.
So the home that we saw, beautiful, very nice, staged. It was great. And then we went to one just, a couple doors down, was not very nice, did not have a very good smell to it. Same price and 200 square feet smaller. Like, what are you talking about? I mean, these are this
issues. Dollar per square foot stuff, it's got out of hand. And, a lot of real estate experts, they'll talk about it too. And I'm like, you really should be careful how you say that. A lot of people, it's funny. I'll talk to someone who's been in the business for a while and they're like, well, the dollar per square foot's really high. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? I go, what does that mean? Are you talking about this house over here or that house over there? That neighborhood averages 180 square foot. What does that? There's 8 different floor plans in that neighborhood. Yeah. Where do you get off telling me the dollar per square foot is averaging that? You cannot do that. If you want to say these last 4 homes, the dollar per square foot, I'm like, all right, now I'm listening to you. The last 4 that are equivalent to it. But saying in general, I'm like, you can't, this dollar per square foot. I actually get kind of annoyed when our guys go with the dollar per. I'm like, I didn't teach you like that. I go, I didn't teach you to look at the dollar per square foot like that. I love the people who average the dollar per square foot up. They add it up. I'm like, well, that was a good way to do that. Would you learn that in 4th grade? How to average? That's not the way we comp the house. We comp the house by common sense, the features in it, and what we think is most comparable. Hence the name comps. What's most comparable to something else. All right, before I forget, I do want to make sure that we give a shout out to our sponsor. We're always grateful to have sponsors on the show. I love the sponsor that we have for this particular show because not only is he very good at what he does, but he's also a good friend to a lot of us, especially the guys on this particular call. Martin Cooley out of BPG Inspections. Thank you for putting that on the bottom. His information is on the bottom. Fantastic home inspector. There's a lot of home inspectors out there. Obviously, we always give multiple referrals for our clients because we don't just say you have to go with this particular one person. But I'd be lying. Oh, I love it. Thank you, Mark. That's fantastic. Good stuff. Martin, look at this, man. That's really good. I love anybody that's a sponsor on our show. We have a lot of people that watch via archive, typically anywhere from 400 to 600 views a week. This is very nice for them. I'm doing it the wrong way. It's very nice when you get stuff like that shout out because a lot of people will use some of the vendors that we do. One of the things that's great about Martin, though, the mini is it's his bedside manner that I love about him. His bedside manner is to where he doesn't scare people. He tells it like it is. Right. He tells them what that needs to be done. He is following the state codes, but he's also telling someone this is probably what I would do. I love it from a review standpoint. where he separates blue items versus red items. The blue items I'm not so concerned about. He's pointing out that it technically isn't correct, but it probably doesn't need anything. But the red items, almost 98% of the time, if he has something in red, I'm of the same opinion that it probably needs to be fixed. So it makes my review very easy as well. So Martin's a great contact to have. Like I said, his number's down at the bottom there, the 817-401-3240. Always appreciate him being a sponsor. And if I'm not mistaken, I always appreciate David. Were you the one that brought Martin into the group, or is it somebody else? I can't remember.
No, it wasn't me, but I use Martin 99% of the time.
Yeah.
My client chooses him.
Well, whoever did, that was a great contact for us down the road. We always really appreciate that. All right, back into the conversation about these dollar per square feet and mixing this stuff up.
There's that, and there's also lot location, which can be extremely subjective, right? If there's a green belt across the street, that's one thing, and how do you assign a value to that? That's a hard thing. And even on a more extreme example, if you're looking at a property that's across the street and has a view of a lake versus which is actually on the lake, I mean, that can be $100,000 difference just on the lot.
So that's a great conversation. Good takeaway from the show today. Houses that are lakefront, not lake view, and houses that are golf course adjacent, I mean, they're on the golf course, they will sell significantly more than the guy across the street. If you have two of the exact same homes and one's on the lake and across the street, you have the same house, this one's going to sell significantly different. And that when you start talking about comparables, and this is why we talked about the heart of the show, comparables are a very difficult part of the business. This is why those two are not comparable homes. You have to find a house that is comparable in size, age, that also is on the lake. And there's not many of them. No. So it's very difficult to comp that type of house. And I will give you a good takeaway from this too, especially those of you who are fairly new. Always seek help when you're dealing with that type of comp. If you're dealing with a comp that is a luxury home, or it's on a lake, a golf course, or there's something significantly different about it, go get help. It is not going to be a comp that you have normally done. Even the experienced people struggle with it. You cannot do that on your own when you first get started. So that's a good takeaway too. Don't even try it. Go talk. Well, I mean, try it, but you make sure you get the consult before you actually go through and do anything with it, right?
Well, I mean, it's good you bring that up because, like, on say a luxury listing, normal listings when we're comping them, you go back 6 months, stay within the same decade, stay within the same subdivision. That's how we do it. And 200 to 300 square feet each way is where you're really trying to stay within. Yeah. But when you go to a luxury home, you find one that's 8,000 square feet, and you may have to go back 2 years, and you may have to go out 30 miles to find anything similar. You know, it's a totally different animal.
I'll give you another takeaway too when it comes to searching a unique home. We teach you to be neighborhood specific, right next to same age and all that. If it's something that's a really special house, like it has excessive land, maybe it has like 8 or so acres and the rest of the houses only have like 0.2, or it is a luxury home on a very specific lot with some really unique things. When you do your searches, you have to expand on those. Those cannot just be in the exact subdivision. They have to be expanded. For instance, rural property. If we teach our guys to be so specific and very close when it comes to comps. Well, I see Cammy's out there watching right now. Cammie is up in the Valley View area. So for a lot of her clients, if she's asked to do a comp on a property in Sanger that has 10 acres, and then she goes and pulls like in that very small area, she's not going to find a similar house with 10 acres. Now, if she pulls her search out and she does all of Sanger and then puts 10 acres or puts like 8 to 12 to 13 acres, now she'll get a bigger sample. And that's the one time that we say it is okay to go outside the subdivision, because you're going to need to see for the area, what does this type of house sell for? And you'll actually find comps. That also brings me to another point that's very hard when we teach. We set you guys up to where we teach you to follow a very strict set of rules on how to comp. But it doesn't always work like that. Sometimes you have to go outside the box. And that's where the guys that we have, and every broker for that matter, that are like following step by step. And they're like, I did exactly what I'm telling you to. I'm like, you have to put common sense in there sometimes too. I go, I can't teach you common sense. When you go in there, you have to realize that this isn't going to work. That's not going to work here. I'm going to have to go do something else to comp this house because I cannot comp it the traditional way. That is why this subject can be very difficult. You know, Cammy mentioned sometimes you have to go countywide, especially as you get closer to the Red River. Sometimes you do have to go countywide, say, how in this entire county, how many properties with 25 acres have sold in the last 6 months? Good takeaway too for the show is that 60 days, or not 60, 6 months is the time frame that we're looking at to consider the data is timely or accurate. Anything prior to that, the market might have shifted and we're really not looking at as much. Those of you who are prepping for your test, that's a good test question too. What do we typically deem to be not meet in real time or accurate? 6 months. 6 months is what we're looking at there.
Yep. I mean, a lot of it too, it comes down to just a guesstimate. You know, where we have to use an educated guess on some of these difficult to comp homes. You know, we do the best we can, you know, and if you can't find anything similar, sometimes we just say, well, we think this is probably where we're going to end up. And you got to let your seller know that, you know, we may have appraisal issues, but we're going to try to get you top dollar.
Yeah. Right. When, you know, you bring up a good point about and this actually coincides. I love it when the shows back to back have information that you can use. So last week's show is about expectations. You know, if you're doing things right, you would have set the expectations that we might have issues with the appraisal. So at least it's not a surprise when it comes up. We knew that this was so we did try to get top dollar and we succeeded from a contract standpoint, but now we're dealing with an appraiser that doesn't think so. If we set expectations, that's not going to be as hard of a conversation as it would have. So I love how when the shows interact with each other, because that's data. If you watched last week, that's data you could apply to what we're talking about right now. All right, just a couple more minutes. I'm going to end on a fun note when it comes to the housing, because this is something that everybody can relate to when it comes to comping a house. So you don't have to be a realtor to understand this, but it's a real fun part. And I talk about it on several of our shows when we're having this particular subject. So houses are ridiculously decade impaired. Okay, it's really awkward if you go back in time for the last 40 or 50 years. The trend that houses used when they were built. So in the 60s, you had every house had this really unique colored carpet, like really thick shag, just absorbing colors, like like a lime green or a purple, you know, the orange carpet. So you have all these in these homes that are built in the 60s, right? So you get into the 70s. And every house that was built had wallpaper, horrendous looking wallpaper, and they all have it in there. And then that kind of goes away. And then you get into the 80s and you get to the homes of the seashell cut bathroom sink and the oak panel walls. Every house built in the 80s had oak paneling and had seashell bathroom sinks. Get into the 90s, home of the Berber carpet and brass fixtures. Every single home had brass fixtures and Berber carpet that was built in the 90s. It's funny, it was so popular, and we got into the 2000s, and that just like totally went like, oh God, Berber.
Yeah.
And you get into the 2000s. And I will admit, the 2000s have stayed pretty steady. We've stayed pretty steady on granite, hand scraped hardwoods for quite some time now. So
beige walls.
What's that?
The beige color walls.
Beige color, yeah, the eggshell neutral color. It really is interesting when you look at it, how decade impaired the houses can be. Because the real point to this, and this is where we're going to end the show, is that you can't compare decade impaired homes. I can't compare a house that was built in the 2000s to one that was built in the 1980s. They're completely different homes, especially if they haven't been updated.
We're going to look back in 2 years and make fun of the the rustic barn or the modern farm with the farm door.
Barn door.
Right. Barn doors. Yeah, that's a new phase too. Yeah. So I'll give you a little bit of help as we end on a comical. Those of you who have not been so apt to update your house or you've just been lazy with it, congratulations. Some of you have waited so long that your house is now back in
coming
style.
back.
You have the same wallpaper that you had in the 1970s. So congratulations on your laziness paying off. you might have actually come back to stock because believe it or not, wallpaper is coming back. I never thought it would. I will give you a little preview too. You better, if you had a lot of money you wanted to bet right now, I assure you the wood paneling, the oak paneling in the 80s, it'll be back. It'll be back because so many people love that look. It'll be back at some point. And if you're investing in any type of apparel, I'll give you a good tip that I've been thinking about. I'm thinking about investing in parachute pants. They'll come back. Everything's always retro.
We have parachute pants.
Everything's retro. Alan mentioned green bridges on the way back. He might be right. All right, guys, look, this conversation goes on and on, for the longest time. Saw lots of people watch the show today. Thank y'all for watching live. The show always can be viewed on archive. Love everybody, the comments that are out there, and we constantly continue to get told how helpful the show is for them and their clients. So thank y'all for watching. We will be back next week. Hope everybody continues to do well, and we will see you guys really soon. Thanks again.
All right, see you.